Well, on behalf of Provo Parks and Recreation and the Utah Valley Trails Alliance, we'd like to welcome you all to the Provo Area Trails Plan Virtual Open House. This is the format that seemed to make the most sense considering the need to socially distance. My name is Doug Robbins. I'm with Provo City Parks and Recreation, and I'm here with James Cornaby from Parks and Recreation. And we'll be meeting tonight with Brandon Plew, the chair of the Utah Valley Trails Alliance, and several others from the UVTA group that have worked really hard on developing this draft master plan that we're going to be reviewing tonight. The purpose of the meeting, Provo City Parks and Recreation manages several trails and trailheads throughout the city. And many of these trails connect and travel through Utah County and U.S. Forest Service land. So we do all that we can to partner with other agencies and groups to assure a well-coordinated trail system that is sustainable for the communities that they serve. Early last year, planners with the Uinta-Wasatch Cache National Forest approached the Utah Valley Trails Alliance to assist them in developing a region-wide long-range trail plan for Utah Valley. This draft Provo area plan is intended to provide a framework for discussion to better organize trail improvements and to create a vision for long-term planning. So tonight is part of this partnership. We intend to share and to obtain feedback from the community about these proposals that would be used in the creation of a final plan to be adopted by both Provo City and the U.S. Forest Service. Tonight's meeting, again, is all about sharing information and receiving feedback from the community. So we'd like to invite you to participate. Make sure your voice is heard. We have multiple ways in which you can do that, and Karen will be reviewing that a little bit. But we'd like to give special thanks to the Provo Municipal Council for hosting this meeting and making available their public feedback platforms that they have. So now if we could turn it over to Karen Tapahe to describe a little bit about how feedback will be received tonight.
Thank you, Doug. So we are using the Open City Hall platform that the council has set up. It's at opencityhall.provo.org. I'm going to share what that looks like. So when you get to the site, there are two ways to use it. You can leave comments even if you don't register with the site. The advantage to registering on this site is that you can come back and adjust any of your comments. As long as you get in before the deadline, you can always go in and make any adjustments or additions to any comments you want to leave. It also helps us as well if you're a registered user, because we will be able to see some different information. Some of you may not be aware that we can even look at how many people have given comments by what neighborhood they generally live in. So like 2 comments from the North Park neighborhood. We have 1 from Lakewood. That kind of thing really does help us so that we know we're getting comments from people who live inside Provo, as well as knowing, okay, these people live near this trail and they're a little more heavily impacted. It's just a really great way for us to be able to gather that input. So when you get to opencityhall.provo.org, there's a list of all the topics that are currently open, and you just click on, it's called, what do you think of this long range trails plan for the mountains adjacent to the city of Provo? When you click on that, it will bring up an introduction that has a lot of really good information. You won't be able to edit this introduction. That's just because I get to. But you can click on read more. You'll see all of that. There's also a link to the full draft proposal. There's a lot more to this than you're seeing on this screen, and it's good to look through it and get a little bit more detail. And another thing to keep in mind is that there are certain factors that this group has to keep in consideration as they make any recommendations on this plan. So landowner rights, the actual costs of implementing any changes, sustainability, accessibility. These are all things, we may all want, benches along a trail, but if there's no money to do that, or if we want it in an area that the landowner hasn't given permission for, it's not going to get anywhere. So we've put that on there to help you keep that in mind. There are two basic areas. So when you go to take the survey, when you click on that, you get an option on whether or not you want to show your name if you're signed in. So you can still be anonymous, and we'll be able to see that, yes, you're a Provo resident, or no, you're not, and that kind of thing. But it won't show your name with it if you want to stay anonymous. And then it's going to walk you through the things that are recommended. You'll get to go through all of those, and at the end, we've got the pictures that give that information as well, and what's allowed there. And then that same reminder to keep those things in mind, and please be as specific as you can. Just saying more trails doesn't help as much as you might think it would. The more specific you can be. Well, I'm glad somebody laughed at that, but yeah, we need as much specific information as possible. That will really help to fine tune any parts of this plan. And whether you're someone who lives near a trail and knows what kind of use it gets and how it impacts the neighborhood, or you're someone who avidly uses these trails and knows what the needs are, there are things you can tell us that others may not be able to. So please weigh in the best you can. And then Brandon will be sharing a link to an interactive map he has as well. So those who want to be work a little more with the actual map and kind of zoom in and give some specific feedback along the trail, he has that as well. So and then if you have any questions on using the Open City Hall platform, feel free to call us in the city council office, or send us a note on Facebook, and we'll help you out. But should be fairly simple, and we're excited to be able to support Parks and Recreation as well as the Utah Valley Trails Alliance to help improve things and aim for the future.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Really appreciate your help there. All right. I think we're ready to start out. Brendan, you're ready to go.
Brendan, you're muted.
That's better. Okay. Yeah, thank you for everybody who's participating. I see several names I know and several I don't know. So my lighting is not good. Let me just hold on 1 second. It's a little better. Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Brandon Plew. I am the current chair of the Utah Valley Trails Alliance. We are just a bit of background. We are a group that was put together kind of under the auspices of Mountain Land Association of Governments, specifically to be a citizen advocacy group that can connect between citizens and the government agencies at all levels. So that includes federal land, state, and city and county government, to try to produce, try and improve our foothills trails system in a way that is environmentally responsible and legal and accessible to lots of different kinds of users. So we've mainly, up until now, been working north of Provo Canyon. So we, 3 years ago, we did a plan for the Timpanogos Wildlife Management Area with the state. That's the area directly north of Orem. We've also been working with the Forest Service on a plan we just finished for the area above Pleasant Grove and Linden. So the Forest Service came back to us and asked us to do this plan for the Provo trails. And the idea here is that this is an area, so especially they were concerned about the area along the Squaw Peak Road. which has seen a lot of use, especially many of you have seen, I know there's a lot of people here that are trail enthusiasts, and you saw last year during COVID how busy our trails were. And I'm expecting that even after the pandemic subsides, the popularity of our trails is only going to increase with time, especially as the population is increasing. So the Forest Service wants to deal with this proactively by, let's plan ahead rather than what's happened in the past is just people have just gone up there and built trails on their own, which is not a legal thing to do. And so rather than just kind of saying, well, everybody stop and just ban it, because that won't work. So the Forest Service wants to plan ahead. And so we wanted to create a kind of a master plan, a vision plan for not just the immediate future, but also the long range future for this area, and how we can develop a trail system that will meet lots of different needs and be sustainable and expand over time. While we were doing that, while we were talking to the Forest Service, we thought it would be a great opportunity to work with the city, because Provo City is working on their Parks and Trails master plan, as well as they've been working on a master plan for the Rock Canyon area, and they've been working on this hillside development ordinance. So the city's doing a lot of things that are directly related to these foothills. And so it just was a great time for us to try to do an integrated plan with the city and with the Forest Service. And I think this is really great. So many different trails kind of weave in and out of various jurisdictions. And so it makes a lot of sense to do this together. So we put together a task force. I'm not going to itemize this, but you can see here we have several of our task force members are here on the panel, ready to answer your questions and talk about some of the things that we've done. But we have representatives from the Utah Valley Trails Alliance, including board members, including professional trail builders who really know the design and construction of trails well, representatives from Provo City, from the National Forest. We have some representatives from some local clubs, including Bike Walk Provo, which has a very strong track record of working inside of the city on improving bike access and bike lanes and such, and now wants to help with working on the edge of the city, as well as the Outlaw Mountain Bike team, which has some great visions for this area. And then we added several residents of Provo. I'm sorry to say, we even invited a few Orem residents because they live close by too, and they wanted to have some to say as well. So I personally am very grateful for all of the work that this task force has done. Some of it was really painful. There was a lot of hiking and biking that had to take place to really scout out these trails. That was the hard part of this, but I think we've made a lot of progress on this trail, or on this plan. So the idea is the plan, we wanted to cover basically everything that was above Provo. So that includes everything from essentially Bridal Veil Falls all the way to Slate Canyon and beyond. And then all the way up to essentially Cascade Mountain and Provo Peak. By the way, you can see the backgrounds on these are all scenes from this area, and there will be a test at the end to see if you know where all of these are. So pay attention. Okay, so the most crucial area where we're seeing the most impact and the most kind of concern is what we're, for the time being, calling the Cascade Foothills, which is the area kind of right along Squaw Peak Road, around the overlooks there, and kind of going up the switchbacks. There's a lot of trails in that area, and there's a lot of potential for trails in that area. So that was kind of the main focus, but in a broader sense, we're also looking at the broader area. So yeah, I've kind of already talked about the rest of this. So here's kind of what the process is. This task force put together this draft. I've put links on the chat. If you'll go through the chat, there's a link to the plan itself, the draft. It's a draft proposal itself. There is a link to what Karen talked about, the city site, and there's also a link to another site, which I'll show you in a minute, an interactive web map that you can use to kind of pinpoint exactly on places that you want to comment on. So we want to get your feedback on this, and then we'll incorporate that feedback. The task force will incorporate that feedback to produce a final plan. Part of what that final plan will incorporate, which you do not see in the draft, unfortunately, we didn't get to that far. So you don't see anything about priorities. So everything looks equally important right now. So one of the things we'd like feedback from you on is, even if you like everything, which things do you think should be done first? That would be really helpful from the public to get that some feedback on the things that you think are the most high priority. We have a couple ideas of things that are high priority, but we'd love to have your feedback on it. So then once we get a final proposal, the next step is to have that be adopted by Provo City and the National Forest. And that's a process. So right now, because it has not been adopted, the major caveat here is please do not consider this or talk about this or publicize this as a city plan or as a Forest Service plan. So I want to be careful about that. Right now, the status it is a draft citizen-made proposal to the city and the Forest Service. So it's with their blessing, so we're not kind of fighting against them, but they have not adopted it yet. They haven't accepted it yet. They've shown, we are very grateful, both the Forest Service and the city have shown a lot of enthusiasm about how it's looking so far. They're excited about the process and excited about what we're doing, but just don't start getting mad at them yet until it's proposed. For the National Forest, adoption means that it's going to have to go through a what's called the NEPA process, which is an environmental process to make sure that what we're doing is sustainable and is best for the long-term health of the forest. So that can be a lengthy process. It may go through that process in chunks. It depends on how we deal with the priorities that come out of the final plan. But so that it may be a little while before we can officially start building trails, but we're working on it as quickly as possible. Going through the city process is a little easier to do. So, and then the last phase of this would be actually implementing the plan, and in this kind of phased priority way. And that's going to include, in some cases, it might be as simple as the trail's already there. It's never been official, but now it is an official trail, and we just need to put up some signs. There may need to be construction, or in many cases, there may need to be some reconstruction. So there's maybe an existing trail, but it needs to be kind of made into a better route or improved in some way. And then the other thing that's often forgotten in a lot of these kinds of projects is we're going to have to somehow deal with long-term maintenance. That long after these trails are built, the exciting part about building the trail, we have to keep them up, and so that we have to deal with that. Now, unfortunately, we'd like to wish that the city and the Forest Service had the budget already to build and maintain all of these things. That we're asking for lots of new stuff, and we're hoping that they'll just do it for us. And unfortunately, that's not very likely. The Forest Service has come to us already and said, don't plan on any additional money from our budget to build all these new trails. We just don't have, we can't get the budget to do that. Things may open up in the future, but we can't really plan on a lot of new budgets. So there are grants available. The state, the federal government, private entities, corporations do provide grant opportunities. And some of those can handle these three different things. So that's a possibility. We'll probably want donations, but a major part of this is going to be volunteers to help, especially the maintenance part, to help to kind of walk the trails or ride the trails and keep them clear of brush and such. So we will need your help. So think about that as you start to say, well, we just want more and more and more miles of trails. Think about that. How are we going to keep these up? So we've had some great, some of our task force members have been great about saying, hey, if you'll build a trail here, I will take charge of it. And so that's always helpful. So before we move on to this, are there any, I want to open the floor for a minute on questions about the general process, what will be happening here. I ask that as we do this, just for the sake of time, I'd like to keep the discussion part here limited to questions and clarifications that we can make. If you have opinions and comments, those will probably be best recorded because we want to record those, and it's a little easier to record those in writing than it is through this video. So if you have comments that you want to have made note of, it's probably best to post those through the system that Karen showed. So are there any questions that we can ask? Or that you have that we can answer about the process in general? Okay, so Brendan, hi Brendan. Brendan asks, will the reconstruction of trails and signage in the TINT WMA delay implementation of these new Provo foothill trails? I don't think so, in the sense that the TINT WMA is going to be is the state government is in charge of that, so they're doing their own thing, and we are working on Orem is kind of, the residents in Orem are kind of getting their ducks in a row of starting a trail club there that will sponsor those trails. So we're gonna, I think we figure it probably makes the most sense for Orem to be the center of kind of the volunteer effort to help with those trails, and Provo would be the center of gravity. Not that you can't volunteer to go help with the Orem trails, but I think we can kind of divide the bandwidth there and hopefully do both these things at the same time. Oh, Chase asks, how quickly does the NEPA process take? It depends. There's kind of two NEPA processes. There's kind of a shortcut process for things that are kind of all ready to go, that don't require a huge amount of construction. So it may be, this is what we've been doing up in Pleasant Grove. Gentry, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Gentry's our representative from the Forest Service.
Sorry, just getting unmuted here.
Okay.
You're talking about the progress we've had on those Pleasant Grove areas, correct?
No, I'm saying, can you tell us a little bit about how the NEPA process works and how long it's going to take?
I mean, that just depends on each project, but basically it goes to each of our specialists. We have a botanist, recreationist, soil scientist, wildlife specialist, all that sort of thing. So we just have to go through the NEPA process, and depending on what these take, we follow the certain steps that are required by our NEPA coordinator, go through each one. And so kind of just depends on the project, how much we bite off at a time. I think it took us, once we had our final plan in place, the last one in Pleasant Grove above Grove Creek wasn't 6 months to a year, once we had kind of all our ducks in a row, but it took us a long time to get to that point.
Yeah, so in that case, we weren't doing any construction. We were only taking existing trails and designating them as official. And so that went through fairly quickly. But if we were building all new trails, it would be a lengthier process. Can get to, what, 2 or 3 years, Gentry?
Right. Yeah, it could be quite lengthy.
So it may be that we had, according to what the priority we come up with, that we kind of take this in chunks and maybe do the easy part first and then work on the harder parts. Somebody asked about, Varden asked about cost per mile. now I have to remember, I'm not the construction expert, and it looks like we don't have Dustin here. Doug, do you know kind of what you think the cost per mile of building new trails? Obviously, it depends on a lot of factors, but
Yeah, I really wouldn't have that.
Yeah, again, it just depends on the type of trail and the soils in the area and who you have build it. If you bring in people to build it, if you have Forest Service build it, if you have volunteers build it, quite a bunch of different factors there also, Brandon.
yeah, but think about on the order of probably several $1,000s per mile, but not like $1 million per mile. But a few $1,000s, but yeah, it depends on a lot of things, but that's kind of the border. So if we're talking about lots and lots of miles of trails, it can really add up. Obviously, getting volunteer work can help, but volunteers can't do everything. And again, that depends on what the terrain's like and such. So
Right. Yeah.
but we'd be
Definitely.
looking at to implement kind of the plan as it is right now. It would be a fair chunk of money, but not something that there are grant programs that could actually fund a lot of this if we got that lucky. So, any other questions? I'm not keeping up with the chat very well. So if Daniel, if you want to let me know if there's any. Okay, so Varden asked, does the city of the Forest Service have funds allocated? The answer to that is no. As I said earlier, the chances of them having existing budget money for doing a lot of this is not impossible, but they've got a lot of other things to focus on. So maintenance might be easier than construction, but any questions? General questions? Okay. Let me talk a little bit about the plan itself. I'm not going to walk through every point. You can read the plan, but I wanted to talk about kind of as the task force discussed things, what some of the strategies, different parts of this study area, kind of different strategies emerged and different needs emerged. And so that's kind of what I want to focus on is kind of an overall view of what we came up with. So I'm going to divide it into a couple of areas here. And I'm actually going to do this on the map. So this is the map site. Again, I've put the link to this is kind of near the top of the chat. You'll have to scroll all the way up through the chat. But there's a link to this. And this will allow you to kind of browse the trails. I don't have the full text of the plan. So you would want to have planned the plan text kind of next to this so you can see kind of what we're talking about with each of these trails. But let me kind of talk about the basic idea here. Just a second. Let me get both of these side by side.
While you do that, Brandon, let me chime in just for a second, because some people are using the chat and some people are using the question and answer feature. And it looks like the question and answer feature, we have a few questions there, and I think that's a really good spot so we can put the answers right with the questions. Otherwise, you know how chats go, you kind of lose track of who said what and which question you're answering. So just wanted to let you know, because we do have a few questions that need answering in there.
All right. So yeah, thank you very much. I do like that Q&A better than the chat. So, okay. So the question, do we know of any opposition to these plans? I don't know if there's any broad opposition to it, to the whole plan in general. The only kind of the greatest issue that we have is the fact that a lot of the trails that people would like to have go through private property, especially those that are kind of right in that kind of gap. There's kind of along most of the Wasatch Front, including here in Utah County, there's oftentimes this gap between the development and the actual national forest or other public land that is kind of undeveloped private property. And some of those private properties private landowners have been amenable to working with us, and some as is their right, have said, you know, there's been issues with people trespassing on my property before, and I'd just rather not have them there. And the city is working with some of those landowners. The city has actually had some recent successes working with some of those landowners to actually come to an agreement on something that will preserve a trail corridor. And other ones, we've had some challenges trying to get permissions, and it may be a while before we can do that. So I think that's probably the greatest thing. Doug, do you want to comment on that? You don't need to itemize what you've been doing, your private negotiations, but you're not.
I believe the trail plan has been pretty supportive. The residents of the city have been pretty supportive of the trail plans. I haven't heard of any opposition. If I could speak to the second question, where does the money go? How are donations made? Now, certainly if there was an element of the trail plan that was, within the city limits, would certainly get behind it as the Parks and Recreation Department and make a supplemental request to the municipal council for funding. For example, cutting in the Bonneville Shoreline Trail in the future. So that's something that the city could get directly involved in, and we'd certainly support that. There's also possibilities for 501c3 donations to the Provo Foundation and other entities that we would partner up with for that kind of fundraising effort as well.
I think we'll try and get all that lined up as we get closer to an actual final plan and implementation. Is to say these are our priority projects for right now, and how we're gonna raise funds for it. So maybe a couple of you, there was a couple of things in the chat that was like, how do I donate right now? And I love that, but we're not quite ready yet for it. So, okay. Well, thank you. That I'll watch that a little better. Josh asks, what does the timeline for building these trails look like? Again, that's something we would like to have feedback from you on, of which ones of these do you think are the highest priorities that you think need to be done the quickest? And those are the ones we'll put on. But parts of these, there are some parts that I've been in discussions with some landowners and stuff. It may be a decade before we're able to get an official trail through there. So it's going to vary. So. Oh, and thank you to the other, I think some of the other people on the panel are answering questions as well as they come up. So thank you very much to our task force members for doing that. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about some of the broad areas of the plan here, kind of some of the areas we're looking at. So the first area, which, and none of these are official names, by the way, we just needed something to call them. What we might call the North Provo face. So this is the area kind of from the mouth of the Provo Canyon down to Rock Canyon. So kind of this area that basically we all see if you're up in the Edgemont, Sherwood Hills area, or along Canyon Road, the area that you would immediately see. So Little Rock Canyon, and this area here. We have the only real existing trails we have in this area is the Bonneville Shoreline Trail and the Indian Road. These were actually, gratefully, this process actually happened before in a very different way. About 20-something years ago, the city and the Forest Service worked together with some of the private landowners to get these alignments done for what we now have as the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, including this area. So we kind of have that foundation to build on. But there are some things we can improve on. One of those that is probably, I'm going to guess, is probably the single highest demand is to finish connecting the Bonneville Shoreline Trail from Rock Canyon up to where it is now. Parts of that are going to be really difficult because of private property issues. Parts of it might be a little easier. So for example, from Little Rock Canyon, so this is above the Sherwood Hills area, from Little Rock Canyon to the current, we can actually build completely on city land and Forest Service land, with possibly one exception that we're working on. It's not easy terrain to be building the trail in, but it's an area that as far as property owners go, it's probably more amenable. So that's probably going to be one of our higher priorities, unless you all say something different. But this is an area, there's a lot of steep terrain in this area. We do want to try and get as much access as we can, but you notice all the pink here is all private property. So there is a lot of that issue to deal with in this area. The second area, and again, sorry, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I want to keep, if you have comments on these specific areas, post those on this website. So the second area would be what we're looking at here. So kind of Provo Canyon, the lower Provo Canyon area. So basically kind of along the Bonneville shoreline, the existing Bonneville shoreline trail, and below that, there's the existing Bonneville shoreline trail, and parts of that could use some improvements, especially the north end up here by Bridal Veil could probably use some grading and some improvements. There's a couple of existing, these blue lines here. I'll explain a little bit of what we're looking at. The blue lines here are trails that are existing that we'd like to make into an official permanent trail. So now it's a social trail and we'd like to make it official. The green lines are new construction of trails that we're proposing. The purple lines are trails that are existing that probably need a lot of work before they can really be designated. So widening or rerouting to make it more sustainable or something like that. Anyway, so you can see here that we're talking about the big deal here is the lower part. I don't know how many people are aware of this, but the lower part of Squaw Peak Road is almost all owned by Provo City. And that gives us, because the Provo City is so supportive of this, that gives us a great opportunity here. There's already, as many of you are aware, this large gravel parking lot there, kind of at where the winter gate is, which the city, I don't know if it's how many people know this, that the city calls it SPORA, which stands for Squaw Peak Outdoor Recreation Area. I think most people refer to it as the trailhead to nowhere. But there's a great opportunity there because we already have a large area kind of cleared and ready to build a trailhead. And so part of this is to work with the city to develop this area here into a kind of a more recreation area. So we're thinking some of the things that have been suggested have been kind of a bike park type loops that's a little more wilderness than what Orem has at the Timpanogos Park. So to be actually a little more out in the woods, but still kind of at a beginner level or kind of a more popular kind of family-friendly level trails. It's also, the other major advantage it has is that this is the only kind of one of the areas that actually is really good in the winter. So this can be a kind of a hub for winter activities, cross-country skiing and fat tire bikes and snowshoeing and such. That trailhead could be kind of a major hub for that when the gates close. So that's kind of the broad brush there, kind of those things. We do have a lot of this area is owned by Springdale, the residents of Springdale. I've been talking to them just recently, and they don't mind us putting this on the plan, but they'd rather not. They're not prepared to kind of open up a lot of their land to public access just yet. So that's a discussion that needs to be had. The next area, and the one that probably has had the most discussion and the most excitement, is this area that for the time being we're calling the Provo the Cascade Foothills. It's kind of the foothills of Cascade Mountain. And this is an area where we've had a lot of trails kind of built recently. It's an area where we kind of have to get a handle on that. There's a lot of activity in this area. And we don't really want to restrict the activity. We just want to kind of guide it. The main issue here is because this is a heavily used area by several users, we want to come up with a plan for this area that ensures kind of compatibility of the various trail users. We all know that things, for example, like a downhill kind of luge run mountain bike trail is not compatible with families hiking uphill. So that doesn't mean either one of those is right or wrong. It means that we need to think about that, and we've been trying to work that out of how to kind of accommodate what everybody wants. in a way that is compatible. So some of the things we're looking at there is this is an area where we might actually have some specialized trails. Let's see. On this map, you can actually switch to see not just the proposed action, but what we're proposing that the users be. So, for example, the green lines here on this now one are ones that would be closed to mountain bikes. So these would be ones that would be for horses, hikers, trail runners, because those tend to be more compatible than with mountain bikes. And then, so those are the green trails. We're actually talking about one that would be up here, if you recognize Cascade Mountain here, kind of as high as we could reasonably get below the cliffs up here, which I think would just be an awesome scenic trail with great views from up there. That might be a long range thing. That would be a whole new construction. There's nothing up there right now. So there might be some trails that are where mountain bikes are not. There might be some trails where they're compatible, where we can have everybody on the trail. And there's going to be probably some trails that are mountain biking only. In fact, one of the major things that we've been talking about doing here is actually building a downhill specific trail park that's actually an intermediate to advanced mountain biking downhill trail park, where we can have actual downhill runs. We're looking at 2 or 3 downhill runs in here that are up to a mile long. And you can imagine that's fairly rare to find anywhere. That really might make this into a destination for those users that want to do that, to be able to do that, including the possibility of, if those of you who are familiar with this is the area that is commonly called the National Guard Camp, expanding that into an actual trailhead as kind of a hub, an upper hub for this whole area, with Spora down there, the city trailhead being the lower hub. And you can also see these green boxes. We've been talking about a couple other trailheads in this area that might be smaller, might be only like 5 or 6 cars, but also provide more access into this area. So that's an area that in the past and probably in the future, this is where we're probably going to see the most comments, because this is where people are very familiar with and use this area quite a bit. The last general area, which is broad because it's not as dense, is what we might call the Provo Mountains area. So this is basically from Squaw Peak down the mountains in the front range here, as far as Buckley Mountain, and then all the canyons in between. This is an area that already has a lot of official trails. The Forest Service and the city both have official trails along this area. And so some of those need some improvements. There's some that that are actually really hard to find because they've become completely overgrown in the upper area. But there's also some opportunities here. There's some social trails in this area that have existed for decades. Most people are totally unaware of the fact that the trail to the summit of Squaw Peak and the trail to the summit of Y Mountain are not official trails. They've just been there. And so they need some work, those 2 trails do, but that's a prime candidate for actually turning that into an official Forest Service trail, those into official Forest Service trails. There's also, those are the blue lines. Oh, sorry, let me switch this back to the other layer here. Proposed actions. So those are the blue lines are the one and that just need some work. The purple lines are ones that might need some more work, like rerouting. And we're still trying to figure some of those out. And then the green lines here are kind of some short sections that would connect all of this up a little better, so that you could actually do fairly long routes along this entire mountain range, which would just be awesome to be able to ride all the way from Provo Canyon along trail all the way almost to Hollow Creek Canyon. So so that just needs a few connection trails there, which are the green lines that we're talking about. So those are kind of that's kind of a broad outline. Oh, there's also along the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. I just wanted to point out one thing down here. Is there's one gap here it's always been a bit of an issue in the southern part of Provo City, what we lovingly all call the gravel pit. And fortunately, Doug is hard at work at that. And there's some progress being made, hopefully, on being able to get an official signed travel route through that area, which would be kind of a great link to have. So, so those are the major parts of the proposal. And if you go into the document, you can see for every single one of these trails, we've itemized some of kind of what we're thinking and what the priorities we think might be and what needs to happen with it, what the issues with those areas are. So please review that as you do that. I've laid this link here, links to the actual draft document. On that document, if you lose any of these links, if you remember this one, that links to the city's page and it links to this web map on that page. So the Forest Service, we were just overjoyed when we started this process, because the first thing the Forest Service said to us is dream big. Don't hold back on us. Don't think first off about what you can build next year. Think big about what you envision. And that's just been a great mission to have from there. But we just wanted to remember, as you think about this, as you have some questions now, and as you make your comments, think about, again, the constraints we have. We need to respect landowner rights. It doesn't mean that private land is completely off limits. It means that we need to negotiate with them and deal and do this on their terms. And then think about cost. Just eventually, there's going to be cost. Think about what's sustainable. One of the issues we have up here is that many of these trails that have just kind of developed over time. Those of you that have hiked to the top of Squaw Peak, you know what the trail going up the canyon is like. First Left Fork Canyon is like. It's a completely non-sustainable route because nobody ever planned it. It just appeared. And so think about kind of how can we do this in a way that is going to limit erosion and that is going to be easier to maintain over time. And then think about how we make this to be accessible to many users. So even though years and years ago, a couple decades ago, motorized vehicles were banned across most of the front area of Utah County, of Utah Valley. But other than that, these need to be accessible to many, to hikers, to trail runners, to mountain bikers. And we'd like to, as much as we can, we've talked to some horse communities, and they've kind of said, well, you know, we kind of gave up on that area. We'd like to stay in that area, but you know, it's been hard to find trails that are compatible with us. And we'd like to bring some of the horses back as much as we can and welcome them back. So so think about that as you have questions and as you give us your feedback. So are there any kind of questions on the general scope of the plan, or if you've actually looked at some specific trails, if you actually have questions about some of what we're thinking about for some of these specific areas? Josh asked about a trail to Cascade Peak. They didn't include that in our study area, so the answer is neither yes nor no. We have one of the things that we talked about, we didn't talk about this, but there are some rough trails now that you can take to the top of Cascade Peak that are not easy trails, but are possible. So I think that might be a more long-range thing, or at least outside the scope of this project. But that's a good thing. Put that in your feedback if you want us to consider that. It certainly wouldn't be a trail up the face. I don't know if anybody's climbed the Pole Canyon Calore trail to the top of Cascade Peak, but it's a beast, and probably not one that could be turned into an official trail. Any other questions? All right, well, I'm already starting to, oh, sorry, Merrick, did you have, wait, let me.
Yeah, so Brandon, I noticed that is that a mistake that you designated the Taj Mahal Trail on the other side of the canyon in your map? Was that on purpose or by accident?
So originally, I think we were going to include that area in this study area because it got left out of the last plan. but we haven't talked, the task force never talked about it. So ignore that for now. There are some important questions that need to take place in that area just north of Provo Canyon, but that's something we need to work out with between the Forest Service and the state and county and some other players that aren't involved right now.
Okay, sounds good.
Any other questions?
Brandon, I was going to mention too that if you could repeat again that this is not a city set of plans, kind of, this is coming from the citizen group, just for those who joined late.
Okay, yeah, so for those of you who joined late, I just wanted to kind of that's a good way to finish. Just bear in mind that right now the status of this is a draft proposal made by a citizen task force we are working with the city and with the Forest Service, but this is not an official city process. It's not an official Forest Service process yet. Once we're talking to them, we're not working against the city and the Forest Service. We're working with them, and we certainly have their blessing. But so if there's things about this you don't like, please do not get mad at the city council. Okay, they've looked at the plan. They like some things about it, but this isn't their baby yet. So and bear in mind that there's some jurisdiction things here. So if you're asking this, if your reaction to this is, well, the city would never have the budget to build a trail to the top of Cascade Mountain. Well, that's not the city's deal. That's a Forest Service deal. So I tried as much as possible on this map. If you look at the map, the background on that, the background colors on that map show kind of whose jurisdiction this is in. So what is in the Forest Service jurisdiction, especially the one that's on the printed maps that are on the plan, have that to say where the city jurisdiction is and where the Forest Service jurisdiction is. And actually, there are some areas of unincorporated private property that are wedged in between the city and the Forest Service that are county jurisdiction. So those might actually be very challenging, just because the county doesn't really have a trails department. So those might be difficult just because they're kind of nobody's in charge really in those areas. So so bear that in mind.
Brandon, if I might just briefly, there was a question about the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. And again, that goes back to what Brandon was talking about, jurisdictions. The trail travels on the northeast side from the north to Little Rock. On the plan set here shows it's on Forest Service ground. So that's part of the reason why this plan is so important, that we get through the NEPA process. That has to happen first before any trail is cut. And then from Little Rock going south, there's several parcels there that are private that would need to negotiate with the landowners there and work with them to get the trail in. And then from Slate Canyon south, again, working in on a different parallel track on that one. So there is progress, and hope to be able to share a little bit more of that with you in the future as we make more progress on that. But this plan really is important in order for us to move that continuous trail connection from Rock Canyon northbound.
Hey, thanks, Doug. The next question was, any discussion of retiring the name Squaw Peak? I don't know, Gentry, is there anything we can say? There is discussion. I do not have any idea where it's at.
For the name?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are working on it with one of the local tribes, but I haven't heard an update of where it's at yet either. So some people have been calling it the 027 Road, or just have still been calling it Squaw Peak. So
I've been telling Gentry that if the mountain has ever changed name, the road should be completely changed, because the road never ever goes anywhere near the mountain. So it's been a very confusing thing. People call that area Squaw Peak when it's actually nowhere near the actual mountain itself. So yeah, all of the names you see here are tentative. So a lot of the names came from the people who built the trail or people who rode the trail and popularized it, and some of the names were just made up. So those, if you have ideas for better names, we'll take them. My neighbor's the chair. Oh, Joe says my neighbor's the chair of the naming committee, and they like Eagle Peak. I don't mind Eagle Peak. Pardon my ignorance, but will there be an effort to establish? Oh, that got answered. Okay. Let's see.
I gave it an answer, but you may want to answer that some more.
It disappeared. Oh, I can bring it back up again here. Yeah. So a little bit about the organization. I don't know. I guess I should see what Daniel wrote here, but so Utah. A little bit about what we're trying to do. Utah Valley Trails Alliance is a valley-wide group. So we are trying to handle the whole valley, which we could never do on our own. Fortunately, a lot of areas in the valley have local groups. So there's a really good group in Lehigh, a great group over in Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs area, a great group down in Payson. Orem is starting a group right now. Provo is kind of not a group that's already adopted this. The group Bike Walk Provo I mentioned, which used to be the Provo Bicycle Collective, Bicycle Coalition? I can't remember what the C was for. That recently renamed itself Bike Walk Provo, and many of you are aware of that group, and maybe Rob could say more about it. But they've been very successful at getting more paved trails in the city, more bike lanes in the city, and they're now thinking about, well, maybe we should adopt the broader region. So I don't know, Rob, if your group has had any discussions about that.
No, I haven't. The focus of Bike Walk Provo is primarily urbanizing trails and bike access and stuff. So I'm trying to get the attention, everybody's attention directed more to the hills, but it's going to take some time. So yeah, that's something that needs to be done because I'm not sure that, because UVTA is kind of this, our focus is kind of county-wide and big picture. We could possibly do it, but it'd be great if a group in Provo was taking the lead on that. Yeah, just to let you know, we are trying to form a nonprofit organization now, and we've got a number of community leaders willing to participate on the board. We think we'll get some more traction once we get that organized and stuff. So I think we'll get more, community involvement, and particularly special interest folks here in the community too that are avid cyclists and such, that get a little more traction. Thanks, Rob. We wish you the best of luck in it, because that'll be great if we can take an existing group instead of trying to invent a new one. So the next question. Oh,
Brandon,
sorry.
I believe Matt Staker is trying to ask a question, but it's having some technical stuff.
Oh, okay. Let me ask the previous question here. Joe asked, how does our overall trail plan compare to what Draper has done with Corner Canyon? I would love to hear some feedback from some of you those of you who used Corner Canyon a lot. We hear a lot we've heard a lot of, as we've been talking about this, a lot of positive things about Corner Canyon and some negative things about Corner Canyon and kind of what it's become. So your feedback, we'd like to learn from the experience of Corner Canyon. So any feedback you can give us on that would be great. That was the Forest Service. There's very little Forest Service land in that area. Most of the Forest Service land is up higher on Lone Peak. And so the Forest Service wasn't really all that involved in that project. It was a lot of, I think it's the Water Conservancy District was the major landowner in Corner Canyon area. So that was kind of a different project. So the question is the map on the screen public? Yes. If you go to this link that I have on here, that has a link to it. I've also posted the link to the map at the very top of the chat. So if you go all the way up on the chat, I have the links up there as well, directly to the map, to the plan, and to the city commenting system. In fact, I think they've been posted like 3 or 4 times on there. So, okay, Matt, or Matt, were you trying to? Can we?
Oh, I'm just on my phone and I'm not sure if it's what's wrong with it, but I can't ask a question
Well, go ahead.
on the Q&A, but I just asked what the next step would be. Let's see, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I was just asking what the next step would be to, if the first priority was to connect the BST all the way to Rock Canyon, what's the next step to actually starting that? Is it approved already? Do we just need manpower, or?
No, we're ways away from that. The next step would be approving it. So, and as Doug said, on that section, so the one kind of the section that you see on the screen now, from Little Rock Canyon north. So this area here, Provo already owns land that reaches the end of Imperial Drive. There's a water tank there. So we actually have street access at that point without going through private property. And then most of the trail is on Forest Service land. So that would have to go through the NEPA process. It's a challenging terrain. We spent some time, the task force spent some time up there traversing that route. It would be on the more expensive side of trail building. But that's something that would go through the NEPA process mainly because it would be a Forest Service trail, not a city trail. Going, as Doug said, going south from there, so making that connection between Rock Canyon and Little Rock Canyon is almost entirely private property. And some of the private property owners have actually expressed a lot of reticence. Some of you have seen fences go up in that area. And so that's something that's going to be a little more difficult to bridge that gap. So we're putting it on the long range plan, but that section, even though that's probably of all of this, that's probably the trail that people want the most. It's also going to be one of the most difficult to actually get through. So. Okay, the question was about the switchbacks through Pole Canyon. So these loops here, we've actually had some people from the Outlaw Mountain Biking group. Let's see, is Tyson. You've done some work in that area. Who have walked in we believe that that's mostly oak with some conifers in it, and we believe that we can probably get some routes in there without actually visibly changing the landscape that much from a distance. Tyson, you want to say some more about that, kind of what you think about that area?
Yeah, there's a ton of room over there, and it is very rough right now. So, but a lot of potential. So there's, yeah, I guess it just depends on once we actually get in there and are able to map it out. It just depends on what we want, really. Like there's really unlimited possibilities in there, other than avoiding the avalanche paths is the biggest thing when I walk through there. So I don't know. I'm not sure else what to say at the moment about it.
Yeah, thanks, Tyson. Bear in mind that on a lot of these green trails, these are not, what you see here is potential builds. Those are not exact alignments that have been surveyed or anything like that. We're nowhere near that. Those are kind of ideas about a trail would be good to have in this area. So don't actually start like going out and writing those in or something. That right now, those are kind of vision ideas, but yeah, there's a lot of potential in that area to build. So, Merritt, did you have a comment?
Maybe I missed that, but wasn't that proposed as to be an uphill mountain bike path or not to access the downhill trails, or am I mistaken there?
Yeah, the idea here, if I go back on this and show the uses. So the idea here was to have what you see in purple here, was to have this set of switchbacks be for the uphill mountain biking. And then the red lines that you see, these kind of three parallel red lines being downhill only, mountain biking downhill only trails. So there might be some speed on those trails. with probably a range of activities, kind of a range of features, a range of difficulty levels for that. There are safety concerns. For example, trying to separate those users from Hope Campground, people staying in Hope Campground. But as Tyson said, there's a fair amount of room over there where we think we can get sufficient separation and kind of get the safety going. In fact, one of the things we've been talking about is taking some of the existing unofficial trail that goes through that area, what you see in orange down here, and turning that into a kind of more family-friendly, hiking-only trail that comes up to the Little Rock Canyon viewpoint. So there'd actually be a foot trail for the campground users that would be separate from the mountain biking. So again, trying to accommodate different users with these trails. Ross asked a question, do we have a way of securing land quickly through the city while the longer processes happen? Yeah, I think we do have some of this. There's definitely some low-hanging fruit. So land that is already public land is going to be easier to work with in most cases than private land. So, you know, we don't have to necessarily apply for one grant to build this entire thing all at once. We can say, here's some things that we can do next year, or even maybe later this year if we can get some of this through some processes. We might be ready to start putting in signs up relatively soon. It won't be next month, but you know, we might be able to get a fast process on some short things, but you know, and then take longer on the other things. So it's certainly not, and I don't foresee us having any kind of all or nothing kind of approach to this. It's going to be, let's do what we can when we can. Joe asked a question, positives and negatives of Corner Canyon or Park City. The only thing that I've heard from those areas is that they're very they're built for mountain biking, and so sometimes they've had issues, and this has been an issue here as well. Is that compatibility issue of can we get make the hikers and the horses and the runners happy, but with still having plenty of terrain for the mountain biking. Merritt?
The other big issue, I'm not a big mountain biker, so maybe Ross Story or somebody could talk about people who have used Corner Canyon, but I do know that there's been really challenge to keep especially the downhill trails maintained, very expensive, very difficult, like as in the order of $50,000 is needed like every 6 months to keep trails maintained. There's been a lot of difficulty in the long-term maintenance, and I know that's one of the issues that we have here with our trail system that we're proposing is the Forest Service and Provo City, I think, want to make sure that there's a lot of public support for long-term maintenance, because you can build a trail, but maintaining it costs a lot of money and people lose interest, and then it becomes, you know, a bigger mess.
Yeah, your typical forest hiking trail can be maintained by a few volunteers with a hoe and a pruning shears. But some of these downhill mountain biking trails, it's a significant professional process to keep those in shape. They get worn out pretty quickly, and yeah, there've been some issues in Corner Canyon with some of the most popular trails suddenly becoming unrideable. So that's certainly something we want to plan ahead for, so we don't get caught by that later. It looks like we're kind of getting to the end of our questions. So, hey, thank you everybody. This has been wonderful. We're really grateful for getting so much public input here on this. Sometimes we can feel like, well, what do the 10 of us know? And so getting those some feedback from all of you has been just really wonderful. Doug, did you want to say anything?
No, I just appreciate you, Brandon, for all the time and the effort you put into this draft plan with everyone with you, VTA. It's just been really great.
Thanks. So just so you know, I think, Karen, I can't remember what we set, but I think we'd like to keep the feedback open until around March 1st, so the next month or so. Maybe a little longer if we could, but I don't know what you've set for the deadline, but.
I just did a default of about 2 weeks only because it does tend to drop off after the first week or so. But we can adjust that, whatever works for your timeline. I can open it up more. And those who are on, if you can look at the chat window, you're going to see I shared again the link to Open City Hall, the link to the interactive web map where you can comment, and then also we broadcast to the City Council's Facebook page and YouTube channel. So if you know of other people who are interested, you'll be able to share this video with them. This video is also going to be embedded in that Open City Hall link, so people will be able to hear the explanations and listen to the answers of questions along the way.
Thank you, and thanks again to I'd really like to thank the city, especially Karen and the staff, the City Council staff that organized all the meeting infrastructure here to do this. I do Zoom every day, and they did it much better than I did. So I appreciate that. So thank you everybody for your participation. Sarah, did you want to say something from the Forest Service? You kind of unmuted.
I did just unmute. I really wanted to thank you all for having this meeting in support of this project. We are very much in support of the project. So I wanted to put that in there. We will assist with the NEPA in any way that we can. We feel like we've heard enough from the public that this is something that we will continue to support. I just wanted to add that in there, and thank you so much from the UVTA, and we appreciate your work.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Sarah and Gentry from the Forest Service have been very, very supportive of all of this and have been very enthusiastic about it. It's been great to get to have. Sorry, it's not often that the federal government is enthusiastic about working with local citizens, so we really appreciate that. So. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we'll let it go here, and we will try to save this. And please contact us if you have any questions or anything else you can do. We also, the UVTA Facebook page is a great place to kind of post general discussion about this. If you'd like to have more discussion rather than just posting a single comment, that's another place you can go to. So, just Utah Valley Trails, I think, on Facebook. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Brandon.